Mycospawn with John and the Royals. My last Mycospawn journey that fall was with my other roommate John. John was a good dude like Omar, however he had more of a cunning side to him when it came to the ladies. He became one of my best friends, but was also admittedly a bit of a rival. We were both white guys born from British dads and Eastern European mums. His mum Russian and mine Slovakian, so we had similar emotional and behavioural phenotypes. I eventually started to view him as a Knuckles character in my life, a friend rival from the Sonic the Hedgehog video games. It was fixed in my mind that I was more Sonic and him Knuckles, while Omar was Tails in virtue of being smarter and younger than Sonic and Knuckles. If you don't know the game, I apologise that this means nothing to you, and I'll move on. John and I played intramural soccer together, and a year later, he practically became my personal trainer. Through his own research and volition, he knew his way around a gym for optimal gains. After I got to know him, he told me that he had taken Mycospawn a long time ago with his friend, and his friend ended up having a seizure during the experience. His friend was then rushed to the hospital where they detected a brain tumour. For this reason, John considered Mycospawn morally good, because if not for Mycospawn, his friend's tumour might never have been detected. Eventually, that friend did die, sadly, but he lived a longer life than he would have unchecked. I didn't doubt the Mycospawn's ability to detect illness, as it was clear to me that psilocytes could do just about anything he wished with our lives. One particularly warm day, John was down to split an A+ dose, and we ventured out back near the campus gardens. It was beautifully sunny as we started to hacky sack, and it didn't take long to start seeing trails as we kicked it back and forth. Our conversation gained more dimensions and nuance as our tricks grew in complexity, each trick in sync with the punctuality of what was said by each of us. Eventually, I needed to catch my breath and rested down in the grass with my eyes closed. In that darkness, I watched the black become reddish from the sun on my eyelids, but also saw a crowd of shadowy ghost humps float around each other, as if they moved amongst each other at a busy intersection. After a moment of sitting with the vision, I quickly opened my eyes and looked at John. "Whoa, man. I just saw a crowd of shadowy figures." John laughed and returned a "whoa." We didn't muck about for much longer and made our way back to our dorm room. Omar and Cassie were there with their childhood friend Sheila. I learned Sheila was about my age, and I was instantly attracted to her. After a few short conversations, it was clear that we shared a similar sense of humour. Moreover, I deemed us, quote-unquote, visually destined to be together, and I'll explain why. I wore an all-blue outfit that day, which involved a blue and white tie-dye Animal Collective shirt, navy blue cords rolled up to the knee, a sky blue bandana, and my lapis necklace. The reader might find it cringy, but I was prone to monochrome outfits back in those days. What got me with Sheila, though, was that she wore all shades of red. Having recently been introduced to the show Game of Thrones, instantly my psilocytic mind rendered us fire and ice, and there was the beginning of our song. She wore maroon skinny jeans with a pinkish red t-shirt, and her hair was brown dyed red. We were destined to be, obviously. Our group decided to trek out to Centennial Woods, now known as a classic destination for visitors and great unknown journeys alike. Once in the woods, John and I made eye contact and recognized a sudden surge of shared energy, not to mention each other's rotating pupils. We ran playfully down the path ahead of the others as we sprung into the air off small rocks and roots. It was cross-country running at best, or amateur parkour at worst, but incredibly fun nonetheless. I fancied we were two big jungle cats in our natural habitat. Aside from that, I had my delusion of Sheila and I being destined for each other, a notion that became even more intricate. The crush had the energy of an early childhood love in the way that the affection had more to do with destiny rather than primarily sexual desire. It was as if I wanted us to be together just because it'd be a good story and we'd be able to be couple friends with Omar and Cassie. Strangely, these romantic notions took on a grandiosity of their own. I was nearly positive that I had figured it all out. Omar and Cassie were royal king and queen of somewhere, perhaps the formation of a new royal family due to their collective wealth, and they had selected their fire-spirited friend, Sheila, to be courted by me, their new water-spirited friend. Since I felt as though I had figured out this union of destined spiritual lovers in the eyes of royalty, I became sure that Sheila and I would hook up later. They all could hide their plan for only so long. So, to let them know I was hip to the scheme, I started to talk in riddles and made innuendos about the ways that fire and water can interact, while I also referred to the king and queen as wise in their choice of suitors. They were under the effects of green power, so they found a way to laugh off my nonsense, however much I felt I could sense them thinking deeper about it. I'm not sure where John fit into the grand scheme, and can hardly remember much more of our interactions with each other for the rest of the experience. The most I fancied him was some kind of jester figure who loomed in the background for the sake of laughs and quips. So where did this destined lovers delusion come from? Sheila and I shared interest in cartoon shows from our childhood and could speak to each other using inside jokes. We amused each other, and apparently enough so that Silencites could liken the connection to one made of divinity. I had been watching a lot of Game of Thrones leading up to that day as well, and the show was new to me at the time. It was easy for Silencites to use the content of kings, queens, and magic as perfect material for a grandiose medieval-style delusion. Who wouldn't want their own personal Game of Thrones, what with one's importance to a kingdom and loads of taboo sex, not to mention the drama of tricks and conspiracy? At this moment in my life, I desperately wanted a meaningful partner. With the approval of mutual friends and our playful first time together, Sheila had me sold. It all seemed perfect, like the plot of a television show. Finally, the moment came when fire and ice could come back together and reunite as two parts of a whole. After one of my jests seemed to bounce with no laughter to support it, I quieted down and we decided to head back to the dorm. As we made our way, I gradually came to realize that my fantasy was likely, well, just that. I had crafted a fantasy and I had been a fool to believe it. It became more likely to me that I had made myself look stupid in front of Sheila. She seemed disenchanted with me, and just like that, my silver tongue rusted. I grew quiet and needlessly grumpy as our group occupied a communal kitchen in the dorm and made dinner. I later checked in with Omar about the whole thing, and he said sorry, but Sheila had a boyfriend, and my delusion was in no way true. He thought Sheila and I seemed to get along together, but he knew her well, and she was certainly still in a committed relationship. He told me not to worry, because he didn't think anyone actually noticed that I had acted strange, and if anything, I seemed like I was just being flirtatious. I was left with an interesting day, no doubt, but troubled by the fact that Mycospawn had gone the route of deception again. How could I be so absent-minded and vulnerable as to have such a delusion again? It became clear to me that I had too much faith in the mental processes that Mycospawn could generate. Looking back, I see this time as a lesson. I shouldn't get too ahead of myself with my expectations and suppositions. even if I had a hunch about someone else's feelings, it was safer to sit back and observe further, and to always be cautious in the detection of feelings from another. On a different note, perhaps I shouldn't consume Mycospawn with people I just met, though that is a self-imposed rule I've since had trouble sticking with. To mix such variables with a relatively new setting, and also in combination with a diet of Game of Thrones, doesn't help one stay in reality. So, I decided to take it easy with my Mycospawn consumption for the time being. Clearly, I had stirred up more mischief than I had solved, and the last thing I wanted to be was some delusional fool in love with false notions.